Please welcome to the stage Mr. Erick Morillo. I know it's early. How are you? You want to pick that up?
All right.
You good?
I'm perfect. Let's do this.
Erick, so I think the first thing I wanted to say, because some of the blurb of what we were going to talk about has gone up in the app, but why now at the start of the summer of 2016 did you decide it was a good time to talk about your health problems, drug issues and everything? Why now? Why was now a good time?
Oh, right now it's a good time. I think for me it's more about trying to help the younger DJs and the people that things are happening so fast, so they can avoid the certain pitfalls that I encountered and led me down a road that was, to say the least, unbearable.
Okay. Before we go into detail, let's get some context, a bit about your background. It's quite hard to hear when you're sitting up here, actually. Firstly, just, you know, because you've been around for a long time, as have I, but for those that don't know, where are you from and how did you get into this world?
Well, I was born in New York, raised in Colombia, and at the age of 9, we moved back to New Jersey. And at the age of 11, I saw somebody DJing. It was a neighbor, and right away, I started begging my mother for turntables and a mixer. And the rest is history. I kind of became the school DJ, the wedding DJ. I did anything anybody would give me $150 for. I showed up and played music, and it's just always been a love of mine since I was a young boy.
And making music was what really transformed your career.
Yeah, I mean, I started making music when I was 18 and a half, 19, but not really knowing that I could make music. But I think because I was DJing for so long, I knew music, and that's why I started to sort of get into the production side of things. But originally I was just going to be a music engineer and mix for people, and it just sort of started from that.
Initially, I think in the UK, we all met you for the first time after making the Reel to Reel record. What happened after that was, I was thinking about this, you almost became America's first truly international superstar DJ, really. Just tell us about that transformation in the 90s of first coming to the UK and eventually discovering this island. How did your profile develop? How did you go about building
It's funny because I started making records with Strictly Rhythm, and at the time, it was about just making money. So they told me $1,000 a record, so every week we were finishing a record and naming it something different, and obviously I like to move it, just kind of took off. And in America, there was no dance music per se on the radio or anything that you could see. So when people said you had a hit record, to me it just meant that it was big in the clubs. And when they told me we were gonna go do a little show in London called Top of the Pops, I had no idea what it was. I'm just, okay, we're gonna go perform. And we get to London, and there's dance music playing on the radio, on the TV, everywhere, and it was just like, wow, I'm in heaven. And what ended up happening after that was that I was introduced to the DJ culture as we know it today. I went to Ministry of Sound that weekend, and I saw David Morales DJing, and everybody was looking at the DJ in awe of him. You know, he had no shirt on, and he's just playing vinyl, and I'm like, why is everybody looking at him? Like, I'm used to in America, everybody's just dancing, nobody pays attention to the DJ. So everybody's just staring at him, and I'm like, everybody's like, they think he's a god. I'm like, I want some of that. And that's kind of where it all, but it really, the Reel to Reel thing really just opened the doors and really gave me the cushion, at least the money-wise, to be able to really then, you know, travel and see a lot of different things and just open a lot of doors and then really for me to figure out what it was I wanted to do.
And what brought you to Ibiza originally? Do you remember the start of your journey, your relationship with Ibiza?
Oh my God, yes. The first time was 1993. They told me to come play a gig here at Space, actually. And I flew from London. We got here around 7 p.m. And they took me to the hotel and they said, okay, we'll pick you up at 6 in the morning. I'm like, what? 6 in the morning? Yeah. The club doesn't open till 6. So I walked around San Antonio, went to Esparadis, went to all these clubs that were in that area, and then we went to Space. And when I walked in there, it was just like magic. There was no roof. It was, happy people dancing around, costumes, a little bit of this, all kinds of nationality. And the DJ booth was probably the most uncomfortable DJ booth I ever saw in my life. It was actually facing the bar. So the party was happening behind me as you're DJing. And at first I looked at it, but it all made sense. Somehow it all just made sense. And that was my first experience with Ibiza. And as soon as we got off, we went rushing to the airport to catch my flight. And it was the biggest tease of my life. And I didn't return again until the following year. But I already knew this was going to be a place I had to continue to come back to.
And how did you end up at Pasha in terms of that was your first residency?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's thanks to Danny Whittle, who had the foresight and was willing to risk it to bring me on board. And, we started. I didn't know that it was going to turn into one of the longest residents by a DJ in Ibiza, but it was just so much fun. And Pasha became my family. I was there for 13 years doing the Wednesday nights, and to be honest, it was some of the best times of my life. So yeah, Mr. Whittle, wherever you are,
hard.
I love you. Yay!
It's actually crazy to think, but actually doing a residency, aside from the Alfredos and the people that actually lived here, people didn't play all summer until around that time. So.
Yeah, you had a lot of promoters that did nights like Ministry of Sound, Amnesia, and so they would bring certain DJs in, but I was literally there every Wednesday. I think I missed my first Wednesday was like 8 years into the season because I went to a wedding, and actually the first year we did it with Darren Emerson underwater, so we did back to back. It was so much fun, and now that I think back, so many things have changed on this island, but what stays true to it is the unity that people have for music, and it's dance music, because I know they tried the hip hop thing for a while and it just didn't work. Yes, I'm kidding.
You've always played an important role as well in helping to develop talent and share your stage. You've never been shy of that. We were looking back at some of the flyers and some of the guys that actually first got their break in Ibiza. I mean, that included David Guetta and those Swedish guys. So, how did you end up meeting those guys? Because I always remember coming to your gigs and there would be people like that hanging around
with the Swedes. It's a funny story because I went there. I was at the time hosting a show for MTV called Snowball, and we went and it was like a snowboarding competition, and then they would do a big party afterwards, and we ended up in Sweden. And these kids after the party, like 17, 18, they're hanging out of a BMW. Hey man, we got a studio here. Why don't you come and check it out? I'm like, all right, why not? And we walk into the studio, and these kids were just playing music, and it's just stuff that sounded really, really different. Their vibe was incredible. They were really all good friends, and it was just like, we stayed in touch. And Steve Angelo, for me, he was so hungry. He was sending me a demo every week. He wanted to be on Subliminal, and he was sending me a demo every week. And finally, the first one we released, it was called 1999. But that's how I met those guys. But for me, as far as Pasha, it was never supposed to be about Erick Morillo. It was supposed to be about Subliminal Sessions, which meant let's have a great party, and let's bring the DJs at the time that were really doing it. So all the DJs that were booked were the DJs that I thought at the time, and we worked with Amy Thompson as well, who we thought would create the best vibes. And we happened to, give a little hand to a lot of the guys who now are running the show.
I think if someone were to kind of personify or write the cliches, and they kind of did it on Saturday Night Live a couple of years ago, as to what a superstar DJ lifestyle was all about. It would be the VIP table business, it would be the vintage champagne, it would be the private jets. I remember even having sushi in your booth with you one night. Was this a conscious, because it all came back to you. You were the first guy I ever met that had a private jet with your name on the side. What was going through your mind at the time? Was this a marketing ploy? Was this enjoying the lifestyle? Was this?
I worked so hard, and I was doing so many gigs that I couldn't afford it. I mean, I remember one August I did something like 27 gigs in 1 month, and it was incredible. But going back to the VIP, I think I was very fortunate to land in a place like Pasha. Pasha was at the time the only club that really did the table thing, and me taking a notice from traveling and going to New York and seeing what was going on, where the table people really enjoyed the music. I embraced that, and like I said, being part of Pasha made it that much easier, because then all my friends from America who used to like to do tables and all that stuff, that they had to be in Pasha because Pasha had the tables, and they wanted to bring the girls, and and that whole thing. So I totally embraced that culture, but Pasha definitely made it a lot easier because they were the first club in Ibiza with tables. Now everybody has tables.
Of course. Were you aware at the time you were starting to kind of attract the kind of South of France crowd and everything?
I always played music for girls. My thing was always about girls. My life has always been about girls. So everything I did, so consciously, yes, I knew that if I, it was always about girls. And VIPs always brought hot girls around, always.
What did you think, and how did you end up with like Tommy Lee and Puff Daddy?
For me, it was about trying to step out of the norm, not doing, the same old. And I was always trying to crack the U.S. I always thought the U.S. could embrace dance music if they were just introduced to it. But because they were, being spoon-fed music through radio, and, it's a whole other charting way that they do things, it was very difficult. So working with people like, especially Puff Daddy, was such a eye-opening experience, because at the time, I thought I was one of the hardest working men in show business. And then I spent a couple of days with him, and I'm like, wow, I'm a slacker. I'm slacking. I really need to, but he was definitely someone who showed me a lot of things, and I learned so much from him. But I was really trying to not only make dance music bigger around the world, but really crack the American market. And at the time, I got so much flack from, why are you bringing them into our industry? They have no business in our industry. And look at it now. It's just like everybody's working with everybody.
So things were going very, very well for a very long time.
Yes.
So when did it start to go wrong for you? When did the wheels start to come off?
Well, I think for me, I was always a recreational partier. I was known for my Thursday morning parties after Pasha at my villa. But it was just always, I was always very workaholic. I think for me, when I started to feel like there was something wrong, was when all these young DJs that I was bringing in, all of a sudden were blowing up and eclipsing me, and all of a sudden dance music popped in America, and all these DJs just got bigger than me, and my ego couldn't take it. It was hard for my ego to say, you're not top dog anymore, you're not the big guy anymore. So I started, dabbling on a daily basis, and that's kind of when things started to, kind of unravel. And then I started trying to make music I didn't love and play music I didn't love. And that's when things really got bad, because I wasn't talking to anybody. If anybody would ask me, I'd be like, oh yes, I'm gonna have hit records, and I'm gonna do this, and I'm doing that, but not really talking to anybody about it. As far as anybody was concerned, everything on the outside looked rosy.
I was gonna say, for a long time, because you weren't missing gigs at the beginning, you were showing up to work, so this wasn't something that was happening in the workspace.
Right, correct. I was still showing up to work. It wasn't, I was hiding it. Like, my partying never happened. People think, oh, you're a DJ, so your partying must have been like at the clubs and with your, after parties. And no, really, the partying was by myself in my bedroom, because I didn't want anybody to see it. I'm such a control freak. I would never want anybody to see me fucked up. That was my thing. So.
A lot of denial going on.
Oh, big time. I thought,
you didn't have a problem.
I thought I was doing the drugs because it was helping me. It was helping me think, and it was helping me that. But really, it was just the fact that I wasn't talking to anybody about, what was going on, and what my ego was telling me. And I had this voice going on in my head about the things that I needed to do and the things I needed to accomplish. I didn't need to accomplish anything. I had a great life. I still do. And it was just that conversation of trying to compete with the Guettas and the Swedes and the this and the that, and, stepping out of what made me happy, playing the music that made me happy. And it just all kind of, I couldn't stop it. At that point, it was just all, and it got very bad.
people around you that are trying to look after you, you're not really listening to them at that point. You did go to rehab a few times.
I had very, very wonderful people. I mean, the person who was handling pretty much my career, Helen, she was at her wit's end, especially when I started missing gigs. She just couldn't handle it anymore. And everybody was trying to tell me, like, what are you doing? But I wasn't telling them the truth. I was lying.
When you went to rehab,
I went to rehab 3 times.
So what happened the first time?
The first time I was sober and when I meant sober, I didn't stop drinking alcohol because I was never an alcoholic. So, they tell you in rehab, you have to be abstinent. And I'm like, but I'm not an alcoholic, so why do I have to stop drinking? So I never did. So the first time I did 8 months, 7 months, whatever it was, completely with no drugs. But I was still drinking. So sooner or later, that catches up with you because, as they say, it's a gateway. Because once you drink a little alcohol, you start getting comfy. And next thing you know, somebody, hot girl will come or somebody will say, want to bump? Okay, fuck it, why not one? And, once you do that one, you're right back to where you started right before rehab. So it was kind of, and then the second rehab, and the first rehab I went for somebody else. Second rehab, I went because I was going to go to court, and it was the only way I was going to get out from going to a longer rehab. And the third time, I finally went for myself, but I still didn't give up alcohol. And I think that was probably the biggest mistake that I made throughout that whole thing was that I didn't realize how alcohol affects you.
As a trigger.
And, at some point, a good friend of mine came to my house and had me committed for a weekend and the whole thing. And I decided because I was going to go to court again that I need to do something drastic. So besides volunteering to do drug testing every week for 6 months to the court, I stopped drinking alcohol as well. And I got a therapist, and I did all these things that they tell you to do in rehab that I did it while I was there, but as soon as I walked out the door, I know better. I know how to do this.
Did you have pressure from your peer group, though, because you were the life and soul of the party? If you stop partying, then the party stops for other people. Did you feel that pressure?
Especially after, I think it was the second rehab, I put it on Facebook. And I kind of, for the first time, put my ass on the line and told everybody, hey, I'm in rehab, I'm sorry, I will be back. And after that, I really got a lot of support from a lot of people. But there were the odds people who sometimes would try to say, oh, you like it, come on, let's do it. And, you got to either kick those people out or realize they're not really your friends.
From a life of so many highs and achieving so many amazing things, they say in recovery, ultimately it's down to your acceptance that you're powerless over the problems. What was your lowest point?
I've had so many, man. I've been arrested 3 times. I mean, you name it. I was banned from British Airways for 2 years for leaving something in the bathroom.
I wasn't aware of that.
Oh, I mean, I've been through stuff. I mean, obviously, I worked so hard on my career, and it was like a slippery slope going down, and I let a lot of promoters down. I let a lot of people down, and having my mother walk into a hospital room and see me, weighing 120 pounds, and I mean things like that I think back, and the things that I put certain people through was, I mean, sometimes when I start to think about it, and you also realize who your real friends are. People come to your aid, even when they don't stand to gain anything from you, because at the time I didn't DJ for a year and a half. I mean, there were so many low points. I mean, you name it. I got married and divorced in a year. I lost the love of my life. I mean, you name it. So it definitely got bad.
For the people in the room, and everyone listening, I've got to ask you, if it wasn't drink and it was drugs, what was the drug of choice?
It was ketamine. That was the one. And somebody asked me the other day, why ketamine? I said, thank God it was ketamine, because it's one of the few drugs that is not physically addictive. So when I decided to stop, it wasn't like my body was asking for it or craving it. It was a mental addiction, and I had to deal with the problem. And once I did deal with the problem, my therapist helped me see about the ego and you got to let it go. What if you never become big again? Then what? Are you going to keep using? And that's when things started to sort of, I had an aha moment, okay, well, I've done it, and I guess if I I stopped, I fell out of love with DJing, I fell out of love with making music, but at the time I didn't realize it was because of the music I was trying to make and the music I was trying to play. After the whole therapy thing and realizing that it was just all my ego, and not DJing for a year and a half, after 6 months of no alcohol, no drugs, it was like I was 17 again. Because what people don't realize that even if you're a social drinker, drinking once a week, you're pretty much you're pretty numb. It doesn't just for me it took 6 months for the alcohol to leave my system, not the drugs, because I had been I had given up drugs before. And what I felt like when I gave up alcohol for 6 months, just 6 months, it was like, wow, holy crap. Okay, I want to DJ again, and I went and I played at Space and I did a 12-hour set, all the music like the music I like, the tribally, dirty, all that stuff, and it was amazing. And it was like, okay, wait a minute, I didn't fall out of love with DJing. It was just the music. And then I decided I wanted to make music. And it's like, okay, what's the best place for me? Because Miami definitely wasn't. That's a party place. So
I was going to say, because another thing about recovery is they talk about people, places, and things.
Absolutely.
And I know a couple of other DJs that have been in recovery, and the first thing they would really say to you is you don't really need to be going back into a club, into that environment where you kind of got into so much trouble. So how did you deal with that?
Well, first of all, when I didn't do that when I first started DJing again. That was one gig. The next one was like 2 months later. It wasn't like, let's get back to business, because you can't. You're very weak, and they tell you don't make big decisions. Don't do anything that could stress you out, because you're not strong enough yet. So for me, the clubs were never a place where people offered me drugs or anything like that. I usually was working, and I was the last person in the club usually. That's just the way it was. But for me, definitely, if you think that you are cured and and it's a recent thing and you're going to just go back to a bar or to this or that, you're fooling yourself. It took me really stepping out. And when I used to go to clubs and DJ, I would bring a sober person with me to be in the booth. No alcohol was allowed in the booth. So there were certain guidelines that were put in place so that and I would leave right away. There was no going to after parties. There was no nothing. It was very, 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 and I stayed sober for 2 years. No alcohol, no drugs, no nothing, no nada. Thank you. Thank you.
I don't want to ponder on the gory details, but for anyone thinking that ketamine's a good idea, do you want to say a few things about that? I
mean, listen, honestly, I'm not going to sit here and tell people not to do something or do something, but for me, it put me in a reality that wasn't real. So I would definitely recommend against it, but you got to do you, and I know that if somebody told me not to do something, I do the opposite usually.
You ended up doing it quite intently to injecting it in your body. You almost lost your arm.
I did, actually. I have a nice scar that, funny enough, looks like my company logo over here. Right. I had done so much ketamine at one point that what usually happens when you do a lot of ketamine, you get a lot of pains in your intestines, because they basically stop working. Because your intestines are so numb, so you get all these pains which are unbearable. But besides that, it crystallizes in your inside of you. So you get stones and you get things like that. So at one point, I couldn't even pee. I couldn't urinate. Every time I would try to urinate, it would be stuck. And the pain that came right after I tried to pee was immense. I mean, I had to go to the hospital, and they could hear me 3 floors up screaming. It was that bad. And having to put my cousin through that was terrible. And when they had to go look and put something in which, by the way, was not something I was looking forward to, but they put me to sleep. When I woke up, they had sliced a piece of my arm off because it was infected from injecting the ketamine into my arm. That's how bad it got. I started snorting it, and I was snorted so much it wasn't enough. I wasn't feeling anything. I would get pissed off because I would party with people, and they would do a little bit, and they'd be like, wow. And then I would do like a huge thing, and it was like nothing. So I started injecting it, and that's really when shit got really ugly.
So how do you fall back in love with life?
How do I what?
How do you fall back in love with life? What's your new lifestyle like? In terms
you mean
of
back into music?
Well, and just life,
How did I fall
back in love with life?
Oh, I mean, for me, I'm telling you, as soon as that first 6 months, it was like somebody lifted a big black cloud, because I had been numb for so long, and I was so like depressed and feeling sorry for myself, and all of a sudden one day it was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, you got a house in Ibiza, you got money in the bank, you got, a house in Miami. Like, what is wrong with you? Even if you never DJ again, go travel. You met so many people. Go do the things that you always said you wanted to do and never did. It was like all of a sudden, I was back, and it was like now I had this energy again, but people saw me again. They were like, "Wow, like I haven't seen you like this in a long time." And it was that kind of it started from there, and then DJing again at Space, and then everywhere I would play was like a long set. I ended up playing at Space, I believe, that year, and it was incredible. And it was just like that. Like all of a sudden, I knew what the formula was. The formula was stay true to yourself. Stay true to the music that you love. Don't try to do anything because you want to be, this or that. Because you know what? I was that without making the music that I love. And look at the whole resurgence of house now and what's happening now. And it's great to see. It's great to feel. And it's great to be back in a club and playing the music that I love. And people see me going crazy, and that's what makes them go crazy. And that's always been part of my winning formula, if you will. So I think that now, I have a better relationship with my family, better relationship with my friends. I show up to events like I did last night. In the past, I would never do things like that. Now I realize that, I want to live life to the fullest. I've got this second chance, and now I just want to live, and I want to enjoy, and I want to love, and I want to be loved, and and that's where I'm at right now.
And how did you discuss in therapy all the issues about the ego and like feeling like you were losing something? We just sat outside when we were looking at DJ Magazine and the front cover, and it's like, I'm not on it, but it's not an issue anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, I'm not going to tell you nothing bothers me. Sometimes it does, but I call my therapist, and he walks me through it. And he, now, one of the things that, and I had therapy before, but what I did with this guy, like, it was about being completely open and honest and not holding anything back. Because in the past, when I did therapy, I would hold a little bit. I didn't want him to know this or not. Fuck that. You got to tell them everything, so that then when they start to give you, like, kind of guide you, they know who they're talking to. They know what your pitfalls are. And I already know what my pitfalls are. Women, by the way.
On all honesty. You've become my neighbor in Los Angeles, and I'm fortunate enough you invited me to your house. You've built an incredible studio. Yeah. You very much feel like buzzing around you, you're back in love with music. You've got some mad collaborations you've been...
Absolutely, and talking about that, I really feel like as I was walking on the right path, and I was staying sober, and I was doing my thing, the universe kept... putting incredible things in front of me, showing me that I was walking on the right path. I mean, that house that I got in LA was fucking ridiculous. The studio is ridiculous. And then as I started making music, meeting certain people, and, just everything that has happened over the last, year, has been amazing. Doing a deal with Armada Records, and, we're about to release a record this Friday. And every 2 weeks after that, the first collaboration with Eli and Fur, who, work with Helen, and how that came about. And it's just flawless. And, life happens flawlessly if you are present and if you stay on the right path, And, it's easy to guide off. And I'm not saying, listen, I am no angel by any means of the word, but I know when it's time to, I know when it's time to go home. I know when it's time not to go out. I know when it's time to do all those kind of things. And I love life now. And, my only addiction right now is music and girls.
I hear you got a record on the go with Jamie Jones as well.
Absolutely. Let me tell you, I have a lot of great projects. I have this girl, Angel Taylor, who I did 3 records with. Definitely the Jamie Jones record that's coming. That's a great one. I got a couple of compilations coming out. I got so much music coming out. We literally have scheduled already the first 20 releases coming out every 2 weeks now. So look out for them. There's a little bit of tech, a little bit of deep, and a series that I'm really excited about, which is a Subliminal Classics, which is a lot of the old Subliminal catalog being remixed by some of the top guys right now, like Nick Fanciulli doing the Constipated Monkeys record. You got the Martinez brothers doing Welcome to the Jungle. Pirupa did Shout. We were just about to release the Kolsch remix of I Go Back, and so many other people. And it's just exciting to be working on that and to kind of reintroduce the old Subliminal stuff to the new generation that's coming up now that is not familiar with the records that we were putting out back in the 90s.
Could be the right place, the right time. I think you're doing that with Armada as well, right?
Yes, they're my partner in it, and I'm very excited about that.
Okay. A lot of people could probably learn a lot. I mean, there's been a lot of DJ books written over the last 20, 30 years. Maybe none as poignant as the one you might write. Do you fancy writing a book?
I am writing. I'm actually in the works right now. And by the way, just to not get off the subject, for the people, one of the biggest things for me as well is that I never thought I would be that person. I never thought, all the years that I used to work, I was a workaholic, drank a little bit, but didn't really party with drugs and stuff. But I never thought I'd become that guy. I always used to watch the E! True Hollywood Story, where they were like big, and right on the 41st minute, they're like, and now they became this, and now and I would be like, how could they let their life go like that when you have everything? Now I know. So don't think anybody is immune to that just because you party a little bit or whatever. We're all at risk, and it's really all about dealing with your personal stuff that you have inside. So sorry, back to your question.
No, I was just saying, are you going to write a book? But you answered.
Yes, book. There's a TV show, the whole works. At the moment, I'm so excited. I'm so hungry that I'm doing projects that really turn me on, and I'm working on a few things. Got a management company now. Got a lot of things that I never had before. I always did everything myself, whether it was bookings, I always did it myself, and for the first time now I have booking agents, manager, all these things that I never really had before. Because
you're a control freak.
I'm delegating now. I don't want to be the business guy. I don't want to run a record company. I don't want to do any of that. I want to be an artist, and I want to be able to come up with ideas, and now I have a team around me that can help me carry them out.
And DJing's still important.
Oh my God, I'm addicted. That's, by the way, when I say music is my addiction, that is it. Being in front of a crowd and being, and feeling that connection with the crowd is, to me, still, is sex. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Ibiza 2016, what are you doing here this summer?
I'm fortunate enough to be able to do the opening of Space on Sunday. So if you guys are here, I'm closing the parking lot 12 to 2, and then I'm closing the main room 5 to 8. I'll be back to do Carl Cox on July 12th. I'm also doing the closing of Space. And if this Jamie record comes out this summer, I'll be doing a Paradise date towards the end of September as well. So yeah, I'm excited. And I no longer, there's no, I need to or have to have that or need to play there or need to do this many gigs. It doesn't matter. I've done it, and now everything I'm doing, I'm just doing it for the love, literally. I used to always say that, but now I fucking mean it. So, yeah.
No. All right. Thanks. I've just been hassled on time. So, Erick Morillo, thank you for coming.
Thank you
for
very
being
much,
so
Pete.
honest. Thank you.
Thank you.